see your eyes in the morning sun. I feel you touch me in the pouring rain. And the moment that you wander far from me, I wanna feel you in my arms again. And you come to me.
Double 067. Yes, it's Mike James actually speaking. Yeah, what's it concerning? And what date have you got? July the 21st. That's a Saturday. Yeah, and did you want the small band or did you want the full big band? Great. So you want us to play some swing music and some up-to-date dance music. That's great. That's ideal. And what did you say the budget was? Oh, well, I'm afraid, to be honest, I can't go to Aberdeen for that sort of money. In fact, that wouldn't even, if we couldn't even afford the small band for that. Well, we have done radio and television, and I've done 2 major films. We're regularly on the QE2, so I think what brought your best bet is to see whether you can improve the budget a little more. I can take my small band, the 10-piece band, for the money that you've suggested, but if you want the 18-piece orchestra, I'm afraid you're going to have to. Yeah, okay. We'll see if we can get us a little bit more money, and then come back to us.
I left my heart.
In the 1940s, big bands were all a craze, with many famous band leaders like Glenn Miller starring in major motion pictures. This was an era when musicians were respected and made a good living playing their instruments. Fast forward almost 80 years, and this is a far different story.
Music of life seems to be like a bell.
Bandleader Mike James has come a long way since his humble beginnings in Stalybridge in Manchester. He wanted to be a professional musician like his father before him.
Yeah, my father was a saxophone player. He actually, originally before that he was a violinist, and he used to play in the old days when there were silent films. They would have a piano player. But in the big theatres in Manchester that were showing the silent films, they would augment the band and have a bigger band. So he would play violin for the silent movies. As he got older and dance bands became popular, he started to play saxophone. As I was growing up, we used to, as kids, we used to go to Blackpool for our summer holidays. And when we arrived in those days, we'd book into the bed and breakfast. My mother would, my dad used to say to me, right, the first job is we have to go and book the shows. So we would go and book the shows. And he said, I'm going to take you to Blackpool Tower Ballroom. And I'd only be maybe early teens, 10-year-old, 11 maybe. I remember going in the ballroom there, and the resident organist, the famous guy, was a Reginald Dixon, who used to come up out of the side, but they'd have a big orchestra then, and I remember just seeing this Charlie Boyle and his band, and that was one of my, I just wanted to be a band leader. And then after that, as I got a little bit older, he took me to the Manchester, to the Free Trade Hall as it was then, to see Count Basie. And I remember sitting in the audience thinking, what am I doing watching Count Basie? Because I was a teenager then, and pop music had come. Elvis Presley was around, the skiffle was around, and all the Lonnie Donegan. And I thought, I'm going to watch in a blooming old-fashioned band here. And I remember the band coming on stage. Not a word was heard from this orchestra, 18-piece orchestra, the full set, 5 saxes, 4 trumpets, 3 trombones. They all set up, nothing was said. They all sat down, and I thought, these are all old fellas. Count Basie walked on, grand piano there. And he sat at the piano and he did 3 notes on the piano. He just did a little bit of few notes. And then all of a sudden he went like that. And this orchestra went woof. And I remember my ears going, I'm thinking, crimes, what a sound. And from that, I just didn't want to be anything else. My mother wanted me to be a priest, but I didn't fancy that.
The urge to become a band leader was so strong that after a while, young Mike started playing piano in a band with his dad.
Yeah, we played. My dad played sax. I've got some photos of my dad playing. Yeah, so we did a few years. I said from being 14 until probably 18. We were quite well known. We used to go out as the Cliftons, which was, I said, the drummer, and my dad playing violin and sax, and me on the old steam piano. So in them days, you could go. We used to go on the bus. I used to have a music bag, and my dad had his sax and his violin, and we'd go to the gig on the bus. That's all the gear we had, and we'd play the piano that was upstairs because everybody had a piano. All the functions had a piano, and you go on the steam piano there and just play it. And some would be good pianos, some would be bad, and we did that for quite a few years. And so we got all the local mayoral balls, and I said we had a bass player then, which was quite modern. I said we wanted a bass player, but before that we had a string bass. And I remember going to a place called Denton, and the string bass player had no transport, so we arranged to pick him up. So we went to the gig. The job was upstairs, and we strapped the bass. We used to strap the bass to the roof of the car. I'd got a car by then, a little Ford Anglia, I think it was. We strapped me and my dad went inside with the bass player, went upstairs, did the gig, and of course we've not been paid by now. So I said, listen, I'll go and sort the money out. Fred, who was the name of the bass player, you go down, strap your bass to the car, and I'll be down in a minute. It took me ages to get the money paid. Went downstairs with my dad, he packed his sax up, and when we got down, the car's there, but there's no Fred with the bass. And I said, well, where the hell's Fred? Anyway, Fred comes out, he said, are you ready? I said, wait a minute, Fred. I said, there's my car. I said, where's your bass? He said, oh, it's over there. And he strapped it to the wrong car. And I said, but that's a white car, I've got a blue Ford Anglia. What's the difference? He said, oh, I'm not very good with cars. He said, but I realised there was a St. Christopher in the window. Because in them days, everybody used to have a St. Christopher to keep them safe. And being a Catholic family, my mother always insisted. And he strapped it to the wrong blooming car. So I said, well, we better get it off quick. And just as we're getting it off, the guy who owned it comes out of the pub, who'd had a few drinks by then, because in them days there were no breathalyzers, so as you were allowed. And he looked at his car, and I could see him think, crimes, I've had a lot to drink tonight. And he went back in and got another double whiskey because he couldn't believe that somebody got a string. We started working for Pontins. I'd just got married at the time. I was actually going out with Jill then. We weren't quite married when we first found our first with local musicians.
With Mike's dad nearing retirement, he decided to increase the size of the band, but with that came responsibilities, not only to the musicians, but also to Jill, his future wife.
Now we're up to 3 brass and 3 rhythm. I was on keyboards at the time. I was playing keyboards at the time then.
With Pontins and Butlins the place to holiday, many major big bands would have resident slots at some of Britain's largest holiday parks. Having to perform almost every night throughout the summer season, the commitment and effort would often mean the make or break of these bands.
And we were doing semi-pro, and we started working for Pontins. I got a job. Now Pontins was quite a prestigious company to work for. I think they had probably about 20 camps in those days, and each camp, as they were called, holiday centres they're called now, had at least one big band. And all the professional bands, Bob Miller, Eric Winston, Joe Loss, were all working for the Pontins or the Butlin circuit. And Ivy Benson was the band I used to relieve, which was an all-girl band. Older people will remember that Ivy Benson had 1 or 2 big hits. Eric Delaney was another band that was working. These were all recording bands and had all had top 10 records. Pontins included, but they would have a night off. So they used to have a relief band. So as I got a day job, I was managing the co-op in Hyde at the time. I was a manager. And we used to do a relief for Pontins. And one night we would do Prestatyn. One night we would do Morecambe. One night we'd do Southport. So each week we'd do a relief for one of the bands. Now, I used to leave home at 8 o'clock in the morning. Jill would drop me off to work in Hyde, which was about 8:30. She'd start work at 9. She'd drive back, pick me up at 5 o'clock. We'd drive then to Morecambe, get to Morecambe for 7 o'clock, get changed, go on stage, do 8 till 12 at the stage, drive back home, get back home 2:30, and then we do the same thing the next day, get up at 8. And this went on for a few years.
Mike eventually started auditioning for cruise ship jobs, but through loyalty to his musicians, disaster struck.
I did an audition for a London agent, was called Gary Brown. Now Gary Brown was a very big agent in those days. And we went down to London, auditioned for a cruise job, and it was for a 6 months contract starting January, second week in January. We handed our notice in at work. There was one of us was a music teacher, one was a plumber, I forget what, the decorator, I can't remember. I handed my notice in to finish on the end of the year, after Christmas. And just at the beginning of December, the phone rings, and it's Gary Brown. He said, I'm sorry, Mike, he said, but we still want the band. He said, but the budget, they've been cut with the ship, so instead of taking an 8-piece band, we want you to take a 6-piece band. He said, you're going to have to lose the trombone player and the guitarist. The trombone player had finished work, the guitarist had finished his job, he was a teacher, both had got families. And I said, listen Gary, I said, did you like the band? He said, oh, I thought the band were great. I said, well then, and this shows how naive I was, I said, right Gary, either you take the full band and we're not going at all. And he said, sorry Mike, you're not going at all, and put the phone down. So suddenly, from having a full-time day job and working 6 nights for Pontins, I finished up with no work whatsoever, because I wouldn't drop the 2 musicians. I felt a loyalty to the 2 guys.
After the summer season of 1981, when the band had stopped working, came a lucky break for the Mike James Big Band.
And they'd had problems with the band on board, and Gary Brown, who one of the agent that had seen the band, rang up and said that he needed a band for the Christmas period. Just 6 weeks to help out, and they wanted a band to start more or less immediately. And I said, when have I got to go? And I had to go the first week in December. And I said, well, I'd love to do the job, Gary. I said, but my wife is pregnant with our first son. Well, our first child, as it were. I didn't know it was a son then. First child. And he said, well, when's the baby due? I said, well, he's due the end of January, beginning of Feb. Oh, he said, oh, don't worry about that. He said, I just want you for the month, from mid-December until middle of January. So to have the band on board the ship, on the QE2, which was the most prestigious ship in the world, was going to take the band up another few more steps. The bands that were on were recording orchestras, Bob Miller, Ray McVeigh, Joe Loss. These were all names of the day, all doing work for the BBC, recording and doing TV. And for me to get mentioned in those names was a prestigious job.
This one's called Lady is Trap.
So I decided we would go. Also, I had a problem as well, is that I was booked to go back for Pontins. So what we did was, with myself and Jill, we decided, I rang Pontins and told him the situation. He said, well, it's such a prestigious job. He said, I can't stop you from going, but will you put a band in to do the Christmas period at Pontins? So Jill, who's 8 months pregnant, 7 months, whatever it was, said she would look after the band at Pontins, and I went on the QE2. So I went on the QE2 and left her. And the problem was the baby arrived early, of course. I remember well, Jill will probably tell you later when you speak to Jill, she was in hospital having the baby, and the band were ringing up to find out how to get to the gig. So she was running the band that was at Pontins, and I was on the QE2.
And it was a dreadful, dreadful winter. It snowed, it was awful. And I was in charge of the band, and I was very pregnant. So I was supposed to go to Pontins at Southport with them. I weren't on stage with them, but I was supposed to be there. But I got taken in hospital, and I actually had Andrew while they were doing the Southport Christmas, and I had to ring them up and find out. Pontins were ringing me saying, where's the band? I had to then ring individual members from a hospital bed on a payphone to find out where they were, because they were stuck in the snow. And then I had to ring them and get them to ring me. So for a whole 7 or 8 days, I was trying to run another band.
We worked with some big stars, but the accommodation we used to get in those was absolutely brilliant. We'd get a suite and a porthole. Nowadays, they have to share a cabin, the band leaders. I got a suite. We used to have a butler to look after us. We used to get payment of, which was such a good pay in those days for the musicians. We used to get paid Sundays at sea. Any overtime we did, we got extra. We used to get paid tipping money, so we could tip the waiter that helped us. We could eat in any of the restaurants. The only thing we couldn't do on board was we couldn't have caviar, and we couldn't go in the casino. But otherwise we had to run the ships, and we got treated like royalty. Nowadays they have a tiny ship, tiny cabin.
Having settled into their regular season on the QE2, Mike had the opportunity to play alongside some of the biggest stars of the time.
As regards acts that we booked, that we played with, as I say, it was the most prestigious ship in the world. And the budget for entertainment was so big. They used to fly acts in from all over the world. Bob Hope, worked with Bob Hope, Vic Damone, Billy Eckstine, Vera Lynn, George Shearing, the number of acts, Petula Clark, I don't know if I said that, Bill Cosby, which was one of the biggest names. He was the highest paid comedian back in the 80s. Bill Cosby we worked with. And then there'd also other acts that we used to play. So the acts were, I could go on forever about the acts that we did on board ship. Guy Mitchell, who was extremely big star. She wears red feathers, 1950s superstar. We had to play for him. We did a rehearsal, one show, And he said, right, Mike, and he said, we did right through all his music, and he said, right, you're MD, and he said, where will you be stood? I said, well, you'll be there in the centre stage there, I'll be at the side of you there, just behind you. He said, right, will you do us a favour? He said, all my music's got the words written on as well as the score. I said, yeah. He said, will you tell me which verse is coming next? And I thought, and I just laughed at him and joked and thought this was a gag. When we got on stage, he did his first verse. After he'd done his first verse, started singing, he turned around to me, he said, what's we saying? He couldn't remember any of his words. He'd been singing these stars, top #1 star, and he just had a memory like a sieve. And I had to prompt him all the way through.
For the arrangements, I use a program called Sibelius, which is the industry standard really for notating sheet music. Gone are the days when you're going to be sit there for hours with a pen and paper and just writing out parts for every individual player. So what we do with Sibelius, we start with a full score. So I don't know if you can make this out. You've got the list of instruments all the way down the side there. So rather than just reading one line, the entire score is playing all the way through, stacked up vertically there. So you've got every instrument from the saxophones at the top, well, the voice at the top. I've actually written the voice part in because the arrangement did go on to be published, available at Sheet Music Plus online. Yeah, so you've got saxophones at the top, altos, tenor sax, baritone sax, then you've got your trumpets, trombones, 4 of each, guitar part, keyboard part, you've got bass guitar, and then the drum kit right at the bottom. And the beauty is that once you've input all of these notes, you can either input them using a keyboard, so you can play them in, or you can literally manually type them in note by note, but you can do a lot of copying and pasting. You can transpose things, that means change key for those who don't know. So once you get familiar with it, I actually find using this is quicker than writing by hand, for me personally. And the beauty is that it will play what you've written in for you. The sounds aren't fantastic, but they're good enough to give you an idea. And then once the whole score is in terms of the individual parts for the players, obviously each player doesn't have a copy of the score because they'd have like 28 pages to turn over. So what you do is each player has a part. I can select, say, the alto sax 1, and there it is. It does it all for you. I mean, you do have to do a little bit of tidying up, move things about a bit, but once it's in there, you just export, press print, and it prints the whole lot out for you. It's fantastic, saves hours of time.
Can you load different samples into it?
You can, yeah. You can put your own sound sets in. At the moment, I've just got the sounds that come with Sibelius for this particular project. But you could open a different project and have a separate set of sounds for that specific project.
So these fantastic trombone sax sounds,
yeah,
they are samples now.
Yeah.
They're so realistic.
Yeah.
You can't tell the difference.
Yeah. If I wanted to spend the time and load a sound set specifically for big band, I could. But, you know, this is more than adequate for telling me if there's any wrong notes. And there you go. The voice isn't very good. It's just like a ooh, 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 ooh. But it's fine for me to hear what notes are in there, you know. You got the trombones and some saxophones. Obviously the drum kit is playing all the way through. Bass guitar comes in now, and you've got the guitar, the and then obviously
so low brass? Is that a baritone
you've got a lovely
sax?
baritone sax there, yeah. Trumpet stabs, bum bum bum. And I've actually written in for the trumpets, because they're not playing anything, to do the oohs, yeah? Just adds a bit of fun to the arrangement, you know? And then you've got the bit coming up that everyone knows. On the brass. So you can hear if there's any wrong notes in there.
It sounds like the record.
Yeah. Oh yeah, well I mean I painstakingly listen to the original and copy exactly what I hear on the recording. And then obviously you've got to have a little play with various instruments, you know. Obviously on the record I think you've got trombones and trumpets I don't think there's any saxes on the original recording. There might be, but you've got to take that into consideration, you know.
So can you strip this down into a smaller band?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this version is for a full big band, which Mike, obviously there isn't always the budget to have a full big band. I'm sure you've spoken to Mike about it. It all depends on how much money the client's got. So yeah, this arrangement will still work. You know, you don't always have a baritone saxophone. That's a bit of a luxury. So it'll work with 2 saxes, 2 trumpets, 1 trombone even. You know, obviously you've got to have your drums, your bass, guitar, all right, doesn't always have to be there. There's a keyboard part in there as well. So yeah, it'll work with 8 or 10 piece quite well. Yeah.
I gotta kiss myself, I'm so pretty. I'm too hot. How the police and the fireman, I'm too hot. Make a dragon wanna retire, man, I'm too hot. Oh, say my name, you know who I am, too hot. Am I bad about that money, break it down. Girls hit you, hallelujah. Girls hit you, hallelujah. Girls hit you, hallelujah. Cause Uptown Funk gonna give it to you. Cause Uptown Funk gonna give it to you. Cause Uptown Funk gonna give it to you. Saturday night and we in the spot. Don't believe me, just watch now. Don't believe me, just watch now. Don't believe me, just watch. Don't believe me, just watch. Don't believe me, just watch. Don't believe me, just watch now. Hey, 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 stop. Wait a minute.
They used to change the band round quite regularly in those days. So I would do the winter season. Joe Loss would come on for the World Cruise, and they would have other. Now, one of the other resident bands on them was a guy called Mick Curry, and Mick. So we had 2 big bands, we had 2 9-piece bands on at a time. But things have changed nowadays. The bands are much smaller, but they don't employ band leaders. The theory being that that they don't have to pay the money. They can get the bands cheaper. They can get a musician to come in from anywhere at the last minute. So now all they have is a set of musicians, and the piano player gets a couple of quid extra to run the band. Whereas in my days it was a band leader. Financially, it's very, very difficult. The only way you can sustain a big band profitably is probably like Jules Holland, who's on the TV regular, and when he takes the band out, he can demand the money, which is thousands of pounds, because you've got to remember to take a musician, 18 musicians, and take them from one end of the country for one night, you're into a lot of money. Petrol alone is a fortune. I've done 1 or 2 special ones at Blackpool Tower. I did the 25-piece for the Jubilee, Queen's Jubilee. I put a 20 with a string section, but it's just the amount of money is just incredible.
The Mike James sound was soon one of the leading big bands of the era, playing some of the most prestigious venues and cruises. Therefore, it wouldn't be long until Hollywood came calling.
Well, I've done quite a few good ones. I mean, I've flew out to the Middle East for a week and didn't even play because they forgot we were coming and paid all expenses. A couple of years ago, I flew out to Greece to play for the royal family and the Houses of Parliament. I did a one-nighter for them on New Year's Eve. But probably the best gig of the lot was being asked to perform in a major Hollywood film, which was at Pinewood Studios back in the 90s. The cast was brilliant. Michael Douglas, Melanie Griffiths, Liam Neeson, Sir John Gielgud, to name just a few of them. And it was a war film called Shining Through, and they booked the band to play one of the main scenes was the ballroom scene, and we had to play the song I'll Be Seeing You.
In all the old familiar places. 6 months into the war, Europe still belonged to Hitler.
And so that was probably the best job.
That's great. I don't know what you want to say anything about the situation.
No. About me being sued and having to remortgage my house 3 times. No, I should have finished. If I'd have finished before I did that, we'd have been all right financially. I could have retired on a pension.
Yeah.
But because we've had to put money in, and you don't make money now.
After this, despite Mike's reluctance, we wanted to find out a little more and managed to catch up with him at a later date to ask him what had happened.
Over the years, obviously, a lot of stress running a massive band like this. A lot of people need to be paid, and you're putting on these fantastic shows. What is the most testing thing that's ever happened to you?
Well, I suppose there's been a couple, Gordon, but probably the most financially the biggest one was when we arranged to do a tribute to legendary band leader, one of the biggest selling bands in the world in the 70s, 80s, and we decided to do a tribute to him. And just in England, we weren't going abroad, we weren't going to Germany where he comes from or anywhere, just England. And we booked all the venues, 50 venues, big venues, national theatres, arenas, all booked. 18-piece brass with a string section bringing it up to 24 players, all booked, all contracted. We got the first job was near home, was in Southport at the theatre there, which is a 3,000 seater, a big theatre. And on the Wednesday we got a writ from Price Waterhouse, I think the company was, solicitors from London, to say that if I performed the night he would sue me. I contacted my solicitor, and they said that legally I was doing nothing wrong, but because he'd so much money he would keep suing me until I ran out of money. Anyway, I got a solicitor on it. It cost me thousands to get a solicitor to try and fight it. I eventually thought, well, the first thing was the show on Southport on the Saturday, and I rang them, and they said it was so near to the to the play date, it was Saturday, and they got a full house, that I would have to pay the money for a 90% capacity, which it was so successful. I would have to pay that all that money myself. I managed to find his management, and I managed to find a trumpet player, an English trumpet player called Derek Watkins. And I rang his wife, and she said, well, he's actually over in Germany now with Hans, that's his real name, Hans. He's not called he's called Hans. He's there with him. Ring him, Derek, on his mobile. So I rang Derek on his mobile, and he said, yeah, we're on the coach going to another Anyway, he put his personal assistant on, and all I got was, we'll see you in court. So I had to cancel the band, I had to pay the band off, I had to pay the theatres off, and I had to, well, we nearly lost our house, and I had to remortgage my house. So I think that's probably the worst one. I've had a couple in the years, but that's the worst one.
Yet you still keep going.
Yeah, sometimes I wonder, like tonight, where we've come to do this job here at Grange over Sands, and band all fixed. 2 o'clock, the sax player rings to say that she's been taken ill the night before, fainted. She's had to go into hospital. She had appendicitis, they've operated on her, and she'd just come out the operator and ring me, she couldn't do it. So I had to try and get a sax player to be here within a couple of hours. Luckily I did, I got somebody that's a good player, and but it's all the stress. But we're here, we've done the jig, we're set up, and let's hope we have a good show tonight.
So where does that leave the future of the band now?
Well, I'm coming to the end of my career, which I'm dreading. I'm going to be a big age in a couple of weeks. I just want to try. What I want to do is, if I can carry on playing and not let the standard drop. One of the hardest things is putting a band together for a night and not being well rehearsed, and that is my biggest fear, and that will decide when I finish. If I find I can't put as good a quality band together that I've done in the past, well, then I will finish, but I'll try and go on as long as I can.
With the number of people going out to see big bands dwindling, it's probably only a matter of time before we lose this form of entertainment altogether.
give a great big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, to the boys and girls of the orchestra. Stand up, they'll not clap if you don't stand up. Round of applause for Gillian and for Matty. And for myself, my James, don't forget, God willing, we'll be here in August. Thanks for being so very kind to us. If not pleased all of you, I hope we've pleased some of you. Good night, and God bless. Bye.
With every era, there has to be an end. With Mike, we have someone with a clear love and passion for the music. Maybe there will still be a few years left yet.
I always wanted the band in the Tower, big band in the Tower. I got it, put the band together, and the directors of, I think wasn't Parnell, it was Michael Grade, I think. They all came up from London to see this new band that was going to make the Tower big again. And the first night, I set up, played a fanfare that we still play now, and I walked down the steps, packed. All the directors in the corner come up from London, and the agent that had booked me. And I walked down, and as I'm coming, somebody handed me this piece of paper. And I usually read pieces of paper requests first, but I didn't, and I just saw, birthday. Will you wish this gentleman happy birthday? So, and I read his name, and it says, Al O'Call. And that was the first word I said on the front of the Blackpool Tower, and I said it again, I said, Al O'Call. And I could see Michael Grade had come all the way up from London going, because this was the band, that was the first thing I said at Blackpool Tower. Jill were kicking me, saying, oh, don't say that, don't. And I didn't, I read it 4 times out loud, and I said, no, go on, I'll find you. And I said it at least 3 times. Then I suddenly realised what it was, and I saw Eric Delaney. It was an old big band leader who'd lost the job. He'd been there, and he was in the corner. And laughing, and he'd set me up. He'd done it because he'd been there for 6 years, and they decided they wanted a different band, and I got it. So to get my own back, and that was the first thing. And I remember the agent, and he said, "Oh, don't do that on me again."